Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, which is brought to you by our friends over at Greta, the home of our electric watch parties during the season and our off-season chill spot at this time of year. Make Greta your spot to eat, drink, and play this summer. My name is Dave Woodrelli. I'm joined by Harman, our technical producer. The man at the controls is Jacob Lazar. I know what you're thinking. No, it's not a Family Feud episode, but of course you want me to talk about Family Feud. So right off the top, I'll tell you that our system for getting the survey out to listeners is going to be a little bit refined this week. And Jacob's told us that the survey is much harder. This week, you will find the survey in the description of the podcast and the YouTube description. So if you're listening on podcast, go to the episode. You'll find the survey in there. Take the survey. We're not going to put out the survey to the Twitterverse until we have like 50 actual dedicated listeners of the show answer the survey. So we're going to put it out later today, but we want to give a chance for the people on podcast, the people on YouTube to fill out the survey. Since it filled up so fast, we want to give those people a chance. So once we have those dedicated listeners of our show fill out the survey, then we will put it out to the masses. And of course, it'll fill up and finish there. Of course, I had to talk about the Family Feud stuff, which again, if you missed it, that was last Thursday's episode. We debuted it. We got like 380 points or something like that. This week, we're going to be back at the Wall Center on Thursday to do round two. Jacob has assured us that it's going to be much harder. Hardman, do you think you want to go first again? Like, do you want to change up our strategy? I feel like if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
We can talk about it. We can think about it. I haven't thought that far ahead, but I know, like week one was great. It was smooth, but we also were lobbed softballs. It would have been embarrassing had we not done exceptionally well there. So we'll have to strategize and really think about it.
Yes, we will. We will have to strategize and think about it. Of course, it's the only thing I'm thinking about, to be honest with you. So I've already thought about it, but hey, we'll talk, and we'll figure it out for Thursday's episode. Harman, we got some news. We got some news that came down the pipe. Oliver Shillington's time as a Calgary Flame has come to an end as he signs a 1-year contract with the Colorado Avalanche at a cap hit of $1.05 million. Harman, Shillington is a complicated case, obviously. He was looking for term in free agency. He obviously didn't get it here. That was reported to be the hang-up between him and the Flames. He signs a contract that not only isn't multi-year, it's completely buriable if he doesn't perform at the NHL level. So the Avalanche get a great contract here. This was a guy that when we were looking at puck-moving defensemen for the Canucks to go out and get, Shillington was one of them. I have to be honest, looking at this contract, I get I didn't get what I wanted in free agency, so I'm going to go to the Avalanche, I'm going to perform well, and I'm going to make sure that I'm able to get it next summer. Like this has show me deal written all over it. It reminds me of like the Nate Schmidt contract. Obviously Daniel Sprong in our own backyard here, but Nate Schmidt at $800,000 in Florida. It gives me those kind of vibes.
Exactly. And for Shillington, it definitely seems like, based on some of the other reports out there, that he misread his market. There were the reports that the Flames reportedly offered him two years times $2.5 million per, and he was still looking for a bit more term or a bit higher of a cap hit there. Because if it had just come down to this price point on a 1-year deal, the Flames would have signed that contract in a heartbeat. So Shillington was clearly holding out for a little bit more. Those opportunities didn't come to fruition on July 1st. And you get to the point in August where then it's just about maybe not maximizing every dollar, but okay, if this isn't the summer that I'm really going to get paid, then how do I best position myself to have a strong year and then get paid on the other side? And I think going to an Avs team where he'll be in contention for a third pair role, can play some sheltered minutes, is going to play on an outstanding team that plays a fast style, that has a lot of speed, that his skating skill set is going to be a strong stylistic fit for. I think it's really intriguing in the Avs as a whole, just to transition it away from Shillington specifically, have taken the model of building blue lines in the NHL a little bit differently than most teams. I think most teams are similar to sort of looking at Vegas, for example, as big, long, rangy, physical, clog the middle, that sort of style, or even the St. Louis Blues. How many people mention Look at the size and range of like Parayko and Pietrangelo, and you need these big bodies, and clearly that's the direction the Canucks have gone in as well. The Avs are different, where you look at the composition of their blue line, and they've mostly prioritized puck movers here, right? They've got Makar, they've got Taves, they've got Gerard, who's undersized and is a puck mover. They're only like meat and potatoes, physical defensive defenseman in that sense is Josh Manson, who will likely play on the second pair with Gerard. And then for that third pair, they've rolled the dice on Shillington and Brandstrom as a couple of strong skaters that can transition and provide more of that skill set that they sort of already have an abundance of in the top four. So just as a team building pattern, that's going to be something that's fascinating to watch, because Colorado's always kind of bucked the trend in how they build their blue line.
This one from Andrew. Not sure Colorado was a good fit for Shillington. Already has Makar, Gerard, and Taves ahead of him, and all who take away from his main skill as a puck-moving D-man, he won't be able to showcase much. This one from Brimpy Fingal in the chat here. I'm assuming in your mind they're just looking for a right side puck-moving defenseman. If we get a left side guy, we will have Myers on the second pair, so replacing him would be more valuable. This is where we're going here, Harm. This is where we're going. We have the Shillington signing in Colorado, so we're moving now to the Canucks focus of how can the Canucks now acquire a puck-moving man. We didn't think they were going to get Shillington anyway, so it's not like we're sitting here scrambling, but we're going to explore that on today's episode, acquiring another puck-moving defenseman. And this segment of our show is brought to you by the Bad for Baseball podcast. Nick Palog and Adam Peddle host Bad for Baseball, the most unapologetic, in-your-face baseball podcast that delivers weekly unfiltered takes on the good and the bad around MLB and the world of baseball. Since 2020, Nick and Adam have been entertaining Blue Jays fans with their commentary and live streams on their YouTube channel, Blue Jays Today. But their love of baseball goes much deeper than just one team. After the Shohei Ohtani free agency drama, the guys knew they needed an outlet to talk ball outside of their hometown team. New episodes of Bad for Baseball drop every Monday and Thursday on the Bad for Baseball YouTube channel or wherever you stream your podcast. If you're a baseball fan, go check out Bad for Baseball. Okay, Harm, let's look at the Canucks acquiring another puck-moving defenseman. There's a few options here, and I'm going to highlight this article written by Stéphane Roger over at Canucks Army, where he admits it is looking way too far ahead, but he said 8 puck-moving rentals potentially available to the Canucks at or near the 2025 NHL trade deadline. And the thing I'm going to reference a lot on today's episode, folks, and in our poll question is the Nikita Zadorov trade. Who would have thought that the Canucks would go out and get Nikita Zadorov in November? Like, that trade happened pretty early in the season, and you just reminded me that another trade they made was for Sam Lafferty. So it wasn't for a puck-moving defenseman, but the idea that we're getting here is that this management regime, and we know this, they aren't afraid to strike. If they see a hole in their roster, they're not really afraid to just go out and make that trade. Like, they go out and get Sam Lafferty. They go out and get Nikita Zadorov once Carson Soucy goes down with that injury. They're not afraid to fill the holes in their lineup when there are holes. And right now, we look at this lineup and we see, yeah, you'd probably like another depth option. It doesn't have to be a necessarily bona fide top 4 guy. Maybe just another guy who can put some pressure on that bottom 3, on those bottom 3 defensemen, basically, right? You've got Myers, you've got Desharnais, and you've got Derek Forbort. How about like a puck-moving right-handed guy where he could maybe go up the lineup and play in the top 4, but at the end of the day, he can play either on that third pairing. He just gives you more versatility. You'd be able to, either have Myers or Desharnais on your third pairing if the guy is able to play in the top 4, right? And obviously we're talking about a right side guy, but there's also the option of going out and getting a left-handed guy too. So let's dive into the rentals that were listed in Stéphane's article. These are just players on expiring contracts that are on teams that might look to move them out. The first one, I don't know if you can really consider him on a team that's looking to sell potentially, but it's Shea Theodore. Right? Like, Shea Theodore is coming at the end of his 7-year contract with a cap hit of $5.2 million. I struggle to even talk about this one for very long because he is the cream of the crop, and any team that's trading for Shea Theodore, who I think is just only 29 years old still, any team that's trading for him is signing him to an extension. He fits the criteria a little bit, but if you're trading for Shea Theodore, you're trading him to sign him to an extension. It's not just a rental. He's not just a puck-moving rental.
Yeah, I just don't see this one for the Canucks, to be totally honest with you. His next contract is going to be expensive because of how many points he tends to pile up. And when you look at Vancouver's cap situation, the number of core players that they're already paying a hefty price for, I just don't see a scenario where when you're already paying a lot for Hughes and Hronik as offensive producers, I don't think it makes sense to double down and hand out another huge contract for sort of an offensive defenseman who I love Shea Theodore and his skill set, but and I do think that there's a chance Vegas isn't the team that signs his next contract because they already have a lot of pieces on the back end, and they go out and acquire Hannafin, extend him right away. I think that was a sign that Theodore may not be a long-term fit for them. And in fact, I remember in the Vegas market, there was a lot of discussion of, okay, he's a year away from unrestricted free agency. Could Vegas, given their cap constraints and potentially not being able to re-sign him next summer, could they look to ship him out now so that they don't lose him for nothing at the end of the season potentially? That obviously hasn't come to fruition, but I just don't think Theodore's realistic option. I mean, for a variety of reasons, I don't see the fit in Vancouver. He's going to cost a lot assets wise, and then there's even the likelihood that Vegas is a good team, and why would they be selling at the deadline?
Let's move on to some more realistic targets. The first one being Marcus Pettersson, who immediately goes to the top of our list because Pittsburgh Penguins. He's a Pittsburgh Penguin, and Jim Rutherford loves him some Pittsburgh.
You know who he was
Penguins.
traded for?
Yes. Oh no, who he was traded for? I don't know, but it was
Yeah.
Jim Rutherford that executed that trade, right?
Daniel Sprong.
That's right. That's right. That's why it was fresh on my mind. But let's talk about Marcus Pettersson, Harm, a left shot defenseman. 6'3". I like that size. $4.025 million cap hit. Look, like the Penguins have an interesting year ahead of them. Obviously, they're going to try to compete, but they were trying to compete last year too. And if they continue to be on the downswing, which it looks like they will be, like, do you think, like, I'll just ask you this as a sidebar. Do you think the Penguins are making the playoffs this year? Because I don't.
I think they're one of the teams in contention for a spot. They're probably on the outside looking in, but I also like their power play was 30th in the NHL last year. They have the talent to be a lot better. So to me, the biggest question is just, can the power play get even to league average? If it can, then all of a sudden they're in contention for a playoff spot. But if their power play is in the bottom third of the league again, I don't think they're sniffing the postseason.
Okay, so if Pettersson hits the free agent market, just by what I'm looking at on rentals, he'll probably be, or excuse me, the trade deadline market, if he's an option there, he'll probably be the most sought after defenseman, I think, that could be on the market at the trade deadline. So this is a target that you're talking about, probably a second round pick. Like, it starts with a second round pick to go get him.
No. It's
You think
probably a
it's
first.
For
Yeah.
Marcus Pettersson?
Marcus
Wow,
Pettersson
okay.
is really good, man. Like he's actually more of an all-around steady, like two-way type, more than he is like a dynamic. Like he's good at moving the puck, but he's a do-it-all. And there's a reason why, like he's the model sort of partner for Erik Karlsson. I don't know if you've heard Erik Karlsson talk about Marcus Pettersson. That's like the Karlsson just raves and raves about Pettersson. Like he's Pittsburgh's only top four defender that can actually defend really well.
So is he in this conversation that Shea Theodore is in as well, where if a team's trading for him, they're just extending him? Like the team that trades for him is going to extend him?
Pettersson may be a rental.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
Like he may be a pure rental. Just kind of depends, but it's like you're not going to get him for a second round pick or like a second plus something else. It's going to be expensive. That's where, like, I love Pettersson as a player, and stylistically, it would check both boxes in that, okay, he can move the puck, but also like he's somebody that Rick Tocchet could hypothetically turn to go out and defend against Connor McDavid in the playoffs in a series.
This one comes from Twitter, Harm. Why do the Canucks never bring up someone from their system? What happened to Hirose and McWard? It's been 2 seasons since they were up here last. They were decent then. Have they not improved? We have a lot of conversations with Dave Hall about these guys. The development is going in the right direction, certainly, but there's still a lot of developing to do. And if you need to have an understanding of how little you can take away from those games at the end of the year when you last saw those guys play in the NHL. Just look at some of the names that have like succeeded down the stretch and then they just look lost the next season, right? You don't really have a great read on players when you're watching them play in mean nothing games. And like, let's be honest, that's what they were at the time, right? Was the Canucks weren't going to make the playoffs. It was a disaster of a season. Let's bring these guys up that we just signed out of college and bring them up. You should watch those guys play in the AHL. Again, McWard's moving in the right direction. Hirose had a ton of injury issues as well. He had a long-term injury that he was dealing with last season in Abbotsford. So it's a development season for them. I don't look at it and say they have an internal option. They don't need to go out and trade for someone. I don't think they really have anybody. Cole McWard might push for a spot. Like he might push for a spot. But I can't sit here on August 6th and say, yeah, Cole McWard's the option. You don't need to go out and even talk about acquiring someone else.
Yeah, Rose is 25. I'm not even considering him a prospect at this point. McWard has some plus Rose is undersized.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever going to be a defenseman that this coaching staff trusts. McWard could be intriguing because he has he's 6'1" or 6'2". He has a thicker frame and moves pretty well. Plus, he had a strong camp last year. Was a really late cut. Like it surprised me how long he lasted, but he's in contention for like a number 7-8 job. So yeah, he's not an internal option. Just to finish up my thought on Pettersson, yeah, you like the player, but and this is where our conversation is actually gonna it's gonna be to qualify for pretty much every player we target is first, do you want to give up significant assets for a rental again? I would argue no, because the ideal scenario would be you either if you're gonna spend big on a guy, I'd prefer it to be a player with term and sort of do what the Oilers did, for example, right? At last year, at the 2023 trade deadline, they went out and paid a first-round pick, a fourth, Reed Schaefer, who's sort of like a nothing prospect, and acquired Matthias Ekholm. They're going to get 3 or 4 playoff runs out of Ekholm, and he's stabilized that decor instead of being imagine what the Oilers would look like right now if instead of that, they went out and traded those pieces for a rental defenseman. And now we're looking at their blue line without Matthias Ekholm, and it's just Bouchard, Nurse, and Ceci. It'd be a massive issue for them. So if you're going the rental route, I'd prefer it being a player that you could get for cheap, right? Sort of in the Zadorov range where it's like, okay, maybe you give up a 3rd-round pick. If it's somebody that I'm going to have to give up a 1st-round pick for, I would much rather try and see if there's a fit for a player that can help me for multiple playoff runs instead of just one. And that's the problem that I see with Pettersson.
Let's move past Ivan Provorov on the list then and go to this range of the Zadorov, because Provorov's going to cost a lot. Provorov's going to cost a lot if he's moved. So let's go down. Further down the list of potential rental options, we've got names like Olli Mata on this list. Will Borgen. You're a Will Borgen guy, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I like him. I'm not as Grants is the Will Borgen guy.
Okay.
He's been on him for a while. I like Will Borgen. He's an effective number 4-5. Nothing flashy about his game, but good size, moves well. But Borgen is Drance's guy.
All right, I like it. Neil Pionk is also on this list. Jeff Petrie, Jacob Chikrin, and that's it for the list of potential rental options. Of those names that I just mentioned, Harm, not Will Borgen. Don't mention Will Borgen. We just talked about him a little. Olli Mata, Neil Pionk, Jeff Petrie, Jacob Chikrin. Jeff Petrie's got a $6.25 million cap hit. I think we can safely cross him off the list, right?
But he's retained. His cap hit right now is 2.3 or something.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so we don't have to cross him off the list. You like Jeff Petrie?
No, I don't. I'd like to cross him off the list for not being good at hockey anymore. Red Wings fans don't like him. The price would have to be really cheap. Like, fine, if you're looking at him as, I don't know, a number 6 defenseman, maybe. But put it this way, you're not going to be able to trust him in a top 4 role. And his game has fallen off a lot. He would need to bounce back because Red Wings fans did not have a lot of kind things to say about him last season.
Okay, Neil Pionk.
First, I don't think Winnipeg's going to sell. Right, I think they're going to be trying to contend for a playoff spot again. Pionk's really interesting because when he first came over in the Jacob Trouba trade, he came flying out of the gates as, I'm playing like a legit top four defenseman. I'm moving well. My 2-way analytics are strong. I am defending pretty well, not making many mistakes. The Jets came out looking amazing initially out of that Trouba trade. Pionk's game since the pandemic shortened season has dipped the last 2 years, and he struggled in a top four role last year. He's on a big cap hit as well. I would need to monitor his play closely this season and see where exactly he's at, because if his performance is close to what it was last season, then again, I'm not sure you can pair him with Susie and trust that, okay, this is the D pair that's going to go out and defend against Connor McDavid in the playoffs. He's a wait and see for me. Oli Mata could be interesting because he's going to be cheap, acquisition cost wise. Plus, he's got familiarity with Phil Pronik. During the season the Canucks acquired Hronek, he was delivering pretty decent. Like the two of them were delivering pretty decent results in a second pair role. They weren't lighting the world on fire by any means, but they were steady enough. And so Mata Hronek, is that good enough to be second pair on a contending team? I don't know about Mata necessarily being top four quality if everybody's healthy, but it's another option of like, okay, if Carson Soucy gets hurt, we know we got a guy in Mata that is third pair caliber, but can slide up and play second pair in a pinch. And again, relative to acquisition cost, he could be intriguing. Mata doesn't move very quick, right? So if you're looking for the speed element, he's not going to give you that, but he's smart and he makes a good first pass, and he defends pretty decently.
That seems like the kind of guy that the Canucks should go get, right? Is a guy who can play third pair minutes, but if you really need him to in a pinch, he can go in the top four. Like that's what they got in Nikita Zadorov, right? And then of course he came alive in the playoffs and was much more than that. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, is going out and getting someone. You don't have to go get a bona fide top four guy. Someone like that though, that can do both, that can give you both, and just add to that overall depth, and push everybody down your lineup. Really. K-Harm, you've got some targets for us that aren't pure rentals. Take it away.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily advocating for these guys. I'm just throwing out options and names, and like, these are guys to maybe track. And I tried to specifically look at players on teams that may sell at the deadline. And again, so I've got about half a dozen here. So first would be Cam Fowler. He's got 2 years left at $6.5 million per year. Obviously, the Ducks would need to retain there. He's 32 years old. Fowler's fascinating because he's sort of been thrust into, for a long time now, the do-it-all number one defenseman role for the Ducks. Been thrown to the Wolves, playing really tough minutes, and he struggled, right? Because he's got no help around him. He doesn't have a top four caliber partner, right? Like even in previous seasons when Jamie Drysdale, for example, was healthy, he had a rookie, like 19-year-old Drysdale as a partner while defending top lines. Like that's an impossible role for Fowler to be thrown into. So the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, he's struggled at times the last couple of years, but if you take into account quality of matchups, defense partner, the team around him, like he's possibly in one of the worst environments possible. And what we've learned with defensemen is when you take them out of a really bad environment and put them somewhere else, especially when they've demonstrated top four ability in the past, they can really pop off. And Hampus Lindholm comes to mind, right? Like Hampus Lindholm, similar to Fowler in his prime, we looked at them as, wow, these are like top pair caliber puck moving defensemen. They've got offensive upside, but Hampus Lindholm's stock really started to fall, and all the analytics models hated Hampus Lindholm when he was in Anaheim in the latter stages. Lindholm got moved to Boston. The environment all of a sudden improved, and Lindholm in his first year back was finished top 5 or 6 in Norris Trophy voting, right? So Fowler would be a guy to study further and look at, okay, if the Ducks are out of it again, which I assume they are, could he be a player that at a retained price maybe bounces back and in more of a second pair role where he isn't asked to do everything, could be a significant difference maker?
Okay, well, you sold me on Cam Fowler, and apparently you have 5 more, so I'll let you continue. I'm a big Cam Fowler guy after that pitch.
Well, again, like this is a guy that I need to like study tape on because he really has not fared well defensively in that top pair role recently. It has to be you'd have to identify attributes and characteristics where you're like, okay, the skating's still there, or this is still there, and this would translate well. Like, requires a much deeper dive than that, especially for a guy that, even if the Ducks retain, is on like a sizable cap hit. Especially since he's a lefty rather than a righty, you'd want to be really certain about the fit. But again, I'm just throwing out names. The second one, this is more of an obvious one, would be the most expensive to acquire, is Rasmus Andersson. Right, 2 years left at just over $4.5 million annually. He's 27 years old, so he's in that perfect age range. In terms of the Canucks contention arc, Anderson didn't have the best year last season, but again, he's got a long track record of playing at a borderline top pair level. There were so many moving parts with the Flames last year with the trades and the uncertainty around always going to happen with all of their free agents. With Anderson, the question is just acquisition costs. And really, this is where, for the Canucks, this is why it's so difficult to talk about potential targets this early, is we don't know what other lineup needs they may have and where they may need to sort of invest their prime assets. Because let's say going into the season, the Canucks don't have, like, yeah, they're gonna try Suter at third line center, and I think he should be fine. But what if they enter the season and Rick Tocchet prefers Suter on the wing, and maybe Suter doesn't build that right chemistry, and let's say that the Canucks want another like Lindholm type centerman, and maybe it's not a rental that they're targeting, but they could hypothetically be in the market for a third line center. Like, we don't know for sure if they found the perfect 3C fit, or maybe they want another like true top line caliber winger if guys like Höglander and Sprong don't really hit. And it's like, maybe some of those prime assets are then used on some of those other needs as opposed to a defenseman. Because, yeah, the Canucks could use a puck mover, but they were still a team that defended really well, and their blue line wasn't a major issue last season. So that's the main thing with Anderson, is fantastic player, but like acquisition costs. So you're looking at a first round pick, and then what are the Flames looking for after that, right? Are they going to be asking for like a Willander or like Karamaki? Because if it's that type of asking price, I'm probably not going to be willing to pay that.
I'm going to let you continue with your other targets. Currently in the chat, and we'll get to anyone else later, folks, but currently in the chat, the question of what would it take to get both Hughes brothers from the Devils is being thrown around, and there's literally a back and forth going on with a few people about what it would take to get the Hughes brothers to Vancouver. We'll talk about it in anyone else, but it's just very funny that you're like, oh yeah, if it's a first in Willander, you probably don't want to do that for Rasmus Andersson. Now there's a conversation about both Hughes brothers, bringing both or all three of them to Vancouver, both of them from New Jersey, of course, and bringing them to Vancouver. But anyways, give us the rest of your targets.
Okay, so this one might make you laugh. Jake Wallman.
Oh my gosh, I don't think he's
after all the gritty talk.
Culture. He doesn't fit in the culture.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, 2 years left at $3.4 million annually. He's a really gifted skater, right? Like really, really gifted. Like a bona fide puck mover. He's not going to be the driver of a pair unless he's on your third pair, but he can sort of play in a complementary type role. And with Wallman, I'm really curious to see, because this is a player that for the last 2 years, the Red Wings had deployed him in a first pair role, obviously playing with Mo Seider. 2 years ago, he was really successful in that capacity. Last year, the Wallman-Seider pair had their struggles at times, but also when you look at matchup data around the league, they played the toughest minutes in the NHL. Like there are probably only one or two defensemen in the NHL that played tougher matchups than Jake Wallman. And so, plus you may be thinking like, okay, if he's so good, why did the Red Wings move him? Well, there are a lot of Detroit fans that are going, well, why did we move Jake Wallman? Like, yeah, the Red Wings had a logjam, but realistically, they should have rather been looking at moving Justin Hall or Jeff Petrie. So now moving to San Jose, the environment change? What does that do for Wallman? What types of matchups does he get? What types of D partner does he get? What does that mean for his performance? He's going to be a name to watch. But if we're talking about bona fide puck movers, you can't overlook Wallman, especially given the likelihood that San Jose is going to sell at the deadline.
I'm with you. I don't like him. He gritties. I don't think he fits the culture here.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Zadorov was still here, then it might have been a bigger problem. But
actually, can I counter that? If Zadorov were here, it'd be less of a talking point because Zadorov would give some funny soundbite about it in the media and be like, "Oh yeah, we already made up," and then it would never be talked about again.
Maybe we'll see. The next one. So this is more of an under the radar option. This is more of like an upside bet. Michael Kesselring on Utah. Hey, you heard of him, Quads?
Oh, I've heard of him. Yeah, it's not a Bobby McMahon situation.
Okay, I'm glad. So he's 24 years old, right shot defenseman. He's 6'5", 220 pounds, but he skates really well and he makes a good first pass, right? Like he's not the most dynamic guy, but you watch him go back for defensive zone retrievals. And a couple times when I watched the Coyotes last year, I was like, wow, this guy is sort of jumping off the page for just being efficient and making the right plays on the breakout. He's also got a good shot. He was a rookie last year, put up 21 points in 65 games. So he's got two-way elements, right? Because he's got the size to where you can probably teach him to be defensively reliable enough. And he was reliable in a sheltered third pair role last year. But he's clearly also got the skating and in the offensive touch to put up some points. He is prone to undisciplined penalties, so you're going to have to kind of coach that out of him. But he was a rookie last year. He's going to make mistakes. Averaged just under 60 minutes per night. And the reason I am thinking about him is Utah went out and acquired a couple of big pieces on the back end, right? Went out and acquired Sergachev, went out and acquired Marino. And so you look at the right side right now. Sergachev's obviously on the left side, but right side, he's got Sean Dursey and John Marino ahead of him. Plus Utah has some defense prospects that are going to emerge over the next couple of years. So where does that leave Kesselring? Right now, he's got 2 years left at $1.4 million annually. He's not a guy that Utah is probably looking at as like, oh, we've got to shop him. There's too much of a logjam. But if the Canucks scout him and really like him, think he's got top four potential that he could grow into as he becomes more experienced, maybe he's a name that you get ahead of the curve on and go and target, because again, the physical attributes, given his size, given his skating, his first pass, already had a decent rookie year, are pretty intriguing. And he's in his mid-20s, so you're not talking about, oh, he's got a ton of untapped room to grow. But he'd be a name that would be on my radar for sure.
All I heard was 6'5". Okay, that intrigues me. Needs some coaching. If you're 6'5" and need some coaching, Vancouver's the place to be. So I like that. That's my new favorite pick. And yes, I did know who he was. I didn't know he's 6'5" though. I'll be honest with you. I didn't know he's 6'5", so I like him a lot more.
He jumps. I'm telling you, like the first time, like sometimes you see guys on like a lineup card and you're like, yeah, okay, I've heard of this name, but I don't actually remember like watching this guy. And so I remember watching the Coyotes early in the year, just like, I think they were maybe playing the Flames or something. And I was going, who's this big right shot defenseman that actually moves the puck pretty well? And I went up and looked him up, and I was like, oh, it's Kesselring. And then when the Canucks and Coyotes met later in the year, I was like, okay, like, again, he's making some pretty decent plays. He's a young guy. So yeah, I did a little bit of homework on him, and again, haven't done a deep dive or anything, but he's got an intriguing skill set.
6'5" is what you're trying to say. Skill set. No, I guess skill set's different. He's got interesting vitals.
Physical tools, you might want to call it.
Physical
vitals.
tools.
I don't. What are we gonna take him into a nurse's room to check his oxygen
measure his
level?
skull? You can say it. Measure his skull. Okay, go on. The rest of your list.
Two more here. Nick Jensen, Ottawa. He's got 2 years left. Again, this is assuming that Ottawa falls out of the race and becomes sellers.
Which you can assume is going to happen. It's Ottawa.
Yeah, it's happens quite often. We'll see though. Travis Green coming in. Who knows?
Yep.
Okay, so Jensen, he fell off this year. Declined. I think he had some injury sort of troubles, but before last season, he's been sort of like the model efficient, steady two-way second pair defenseman. Like for a long time, Jensen and Orlov could move the puck well, defend the neutral zone well, defend the rush well, put up strong underlying results, and were just steady, efficient, competent. I honestly, for a long while, looked at Jensen as one of the most underrated top four defensemen in the NHL. And when I would talk to other executives around the NHL, they would agree that like, hey, this is a guy that that is a lot better than he gets credit for. Last year struggled, was a lot more mistake prone. I think his skating was less dynamic. So this is a player that you're going to have to see if he bounces back. But if he bounces back in Ottawa, then you're like, okay, last year was just a blip in the radar. Maybe was just dealing with some injuries. The long-term track record is there that he's thrived in a top four role. So he'd be a player to watch, especially as a right shot. If the Senators fall out of it and they're selling again, maybe he could be a fit.
Like clockwork, the Senators fans on Twitter talk so much crap about how great their offseason was, and they're like, this guy's good for 30 goals, this guy's good for 20, and they like, I don't know how. I open Twitter and I just see like a projected Ottawa Senators lineup, and then fans being like, this is scary good, this is sneaky good, and then November it's over. Like November hits and they're like, oh, what went wrong? And you gotta read all the think pieces about what really went wrong for the Senators this year. All the best, Travis Green, but I don't know. If we talk about annoying fan bases, Ottawa is quietly up there, I think.
Yeah, Hot Summer Pierre was tough look.
Tough look. Okay.
I got one more left.
Yeah, one more. Yeah.
So this is my favorite. But Mike Matheson.
Oh boy.
In Montreal. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about the Pedersen connection. I'm just pulling up all these old villains.
We're gonna take away your wingers. The wingers we signed for you. We're gonna take those guys away, and we just traded for Mike Matheson.
Okay, maybe I genuinely totally forgot about that until I brought his name up just now. So maybe scratch him off the list because dude, like there are other reasons it's not a great fit.
The thing is like people are like, oh, it was his rookie season. Pedersen's forgotten about it. What was it, 2 years ago? Pedersen undresses Mike Matheson when the Canucks are playing the Montreal Canadiens, scores the game-winning goal in overtime, and then I think it was Faber that asked him about it. It was like, hey, did you know that it was Mike Matheson you like dangled? And Pedersen kind of stopped. Riley smiled and then just goes, no comment, and then just continue. He knows. Of course he knows. Like, Pedersen doesn't like that dude.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't love the fit anyway. I brought him up just because we're talking about non-rental puck movers. Matheson has been playing on Montreal's top pair. He's got a lot of offensive tools. Not the highest IQ, but is one of the best skating defensemen in the NHL. Would be like sometimes he moves and you're like, is this guy a budget Quinn Hughes? Like he moves that well. He's got 2 years left at just under $5 billion. I'd like him a lot more if he was a righty rather than a lefty, because he's not going to be cheap to acquire. And if we're going to pay a lot for another defenseman, I'd prefer it to be like acquisition cost wise. I'd prefer it to be a righty anyway. And now that you mentioned the Pedersen connection, probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, based on the, how many names we throw here? 14. We've thrown out 14 names. I had 8 rentals. You had 6 non-rentals. Out of the 14 names, you just got to pick one. You don't have to explain it. People don't need an explanation for my pick. Who do you most want to see the Canucks trade for out of these 14 names? Do you need a refresher on the names?
For the non-rentals, I'm going to say Kesselring.
That was my pick. We can both have that pick. We
can both have that.
Seems like a pretty solid addition for the Canucks.
Yeah. Right. The rentals I forgot.
Yeah, who cares? I'm all about Kesselring now. You just started the new Riley Tough bit, just so you know.
Watch him have a sophomore slump.
No, it's not gonna happen. Who, Riley Tough? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. Let's see, someone in the Facebook chat really likes Matheson. But again, Matheson, with Pedersen, it'd be a weird that would be a little too weird.
You could, I'm sure you can mend it, man. Like, there's been a lot worse.
Matheson's apparently a really good guy, isn't it? Tom that really loves Matheson.
Drance is attested to Mike Matheson's character. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let's get to our poll question, which is kind of on this topic in some ways. It's our poll question, and it is brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Our poll question today: when will the Canucks make their next trade? I thought this was a bad poll question, but it's got some good votes here. It's very even. Before training camp, in preseason, in season, but before November, and finally after November. Harman, right now, leading the vote is in season before November. An early trade, 34.4% say that. In preseason, 24.5% say that. 21.9% say before training camp, and 19.2%, the lowest vote getter so far, after November. I'm curious when it's going to happen. We were talking about it earlier. They struck early, went out and got Sam Lafferty very early on. And then a little bit later, also still kind of early in the season in November, they go out and get Nikita Zadorov, which is why I used that November kind of as my benchmark. So it's an interesting poll question. It turned out to be better than I thought. I'm going to tell you, Harm, I think they make a trade before training camp. I'm going to go with before training camp is my answer.
For what? For defenseman?
No. Well, yeah, I think they're going to make it. I think they're going to make it for a defenseman, but I think they will make a trade for sure before training camp.
Interesting. I could see it, but let me play devil's advocate, because pretty much nobody voted after November. This would be the scenario or the thought process behind it, but behind a trade not happening until closer to the deadline, maybe, or at least until December. There's a lot of experimentation that the Canucks are going to be running in training camp when the season opens. And how can you know what your needs are until you've experimented different options, right? Because what Patrick Allvin mentioned, for example, at one of his earlier press conferences was, we may split Hughes and Hronek. So we're talking about, acquiring a puck mover. Well, what if they experiment with different partners for Hughes, and now all of a sudden Soucy and Hronek work as a second pair, and now the defenseman you're looking for midseason maybe isn't a puck mover for the second pair. Maybe it's a different upgraded partner for Hughes, rather than, let's say, it's Vinny Desharnais that gets the temporary reps with Hughes. That need all of a sudden is different than what we're talking about right now. Or again, what's going to happen at third line center? We think Pius Suter or Teddy Bluger should be logical fits, but for whatever reason, what if they're not able to build their chemistry, or what if somebody gets hurt, and now that's all of a sudden a need. So many different winger battles that are going to happen. We're going to have to see how different guys hit. What does Höglander look like? What does Sprong look like? Even Kiefer Sherwood, is he a guy that can have a strong camp, work his way further up the lineup? How does Heinen fit? I think the scenario, if it does last beyond November, would be, well, let's see how all these guys fit to see what pieces of the puzzle are missing before we go out and make a move and spend assets or sort of eat into our cap space.
How does Cole McWard fit? That's the question. It's going to be answered in training camp. That was our poll question, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. Okay, let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. From July 30th through the end of August, the Seas have 18 games in the glorious summer weather here in Vancouver. Fireworks extravaganzas on Thursday nights, nooners on Friday afternoons, a good reason to leave work early on a Friday, and family fun Sundays. These games are all sure to be packed, so get your tickets early. Don't wait. Call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. All right, Harm, you have to answer it. My first anyone else that I'm bringing up is people in the chat. We're talking about trading for Jack Hughes. I'll just be honest. I don't think there's a trade package out there that was put in the chat that gets it done. Like there's one, and no offense to the people who are putting these in, because it's good conversation. It's August conversation. Tyson Carter, I disagreed with this one, and I think he disagreed with it afterwards as well. But he said it would be Pettersson, Willander, Lekaramaki, Höglander, and a first to get both Hughes brothers in Vancouver.
To get both?
Jack
You're not
Hughes,
getting both.
That's not enough for Jack Hughes alone.
Yeah.
Jack Hughes is younger than Elias Pettersson. Arguably, he's a better player. I think that's safe to say. He is paid less. He's on a much better contract than Elias Pettersson. It's going to cost a hell of a lot. It's multiple first-round picks. It's all of your best assets. Like, you're not going to be left with much at the end of that. And at the end of the day, there are just some trades that simply don't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the Devils. It doesn't make sense for the Canucks. I know everybody wants to see all the Hughes brothers playing together. It's not going to happen for now. It's just not. It's not going to happen for now. This is just a trade. It's just not going to happen. It just doesn't make sense for either side. And when that happens, you aren't able to find a trade. That's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, if you call the Devils and you're like, we want to work out a Hughes trade, they're going to be like, great, what do we got to pay for Quinn?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
The Devils are trying to figure out how do we pry Quinn from Vancouver and unite them, and they're closer to it than Vancouver is. So,
oh man. Okay, this one from RP88. How would you rate the style of toughness the Canucks use to control play compared to other teams? I had one conversation this year with, and this is because I don't talk to many opposing team players, but I had one conversation off the record with an opposing team player about how hard it is to go into the corners against the Canucks now. And I mean, the Canucks want to be hard to play against. They've talked about it for years, but like going into the corners specifically and like puck retrievals and, going in on a 50-50 puck battle with the Canucks defenseman. He didn't call it scary, but he's just said like, it's annoying that you're going to get hit and the guy hitting you is a giant. Like this was when Zadorov, Myers, this is who we're talking about, right? And I'm not going to name the player, but he just said like, he's like, yeah, like that's something that this team's improved a lot that no one, he said no one talks about. I think we've talked about it a lot, but he just said specifically going into the corners is absolutely awful against this team now. So I think that's that's an edge they have in the toughness department is like guys go in. Hockey's a fast game. If you're thinking twice about going into the corners, you're like, okay, who's going to hit me? How is this going to feel? It's a nice advantage to have.
Yeah, I also think of a net front battles. I remember years past, it used to be just way too easy to clean up rebounds, tips, deflections, just set up shop as a forward in and around the blue crease in the offensive zone. Whereas now you're going to have to take some bumps and bruises to get to the inside against some of Vancouver's bigger defensemen. Those guys are going to clog the middle very well. Another area, wall battles, kind of similar premise to the corners thing. Vancouver's wingers do a good job. And I don't know, people's definition of toughness is different. This is more a functional toughness where the Canucks wingers are generally tough to move off the puck or bump, especially when defensemen are pinching. I still think they've got room for improvement there. The forecheck is another area where Vancouver's forwards are going to come at you with speed, with a high work rate. Think about how many. It's not even the bigger guys. Think about how many defensemen Nils Höglander drove nuts last year. It used to be hilarious just to see.
Vincent Desharnais, chief
Matthias Ekholm too.
Matthias Ekholm.
So that's an area where their toughness, their work rate, sort of has been an advantage in helping them spend more time in the offensive zone, recover more pucks. And this isn't toughness, but a sort of tough to play against. They just apply so much pressure all over the ice. That's what Andrew Brunette highlighted in the regular season when he gave his flowers to Rick Tocchet is they just pressure the ice everywhere. And that's a coach's dream, is to have a team where when you're defending the neutral zone, for example, there are no large empty pockets of ice that opposing puck carriers can just go uncontested through. The Canucks always have layers of support, of pressure, and that's not like a physical, intimidating thing, but it is annoying, difficult to play against.
Okay, this is from Dr. Haas. Is NHL 25 even worth it? I think he's talking about EA NHL 25. as somebody that plays NHL, like I play the NHL games, and I've talked about it before. Faber and I dust everybody every night that we play. We are a Div 1 team. We're among the best, I think, in the world. I don't know about getting NHL 25. Like I play 24 regularly. I didn't buy 24 at regular price. Basically what I do now, the past like 3 years I've done this. I just wait till the first price reduction. That happens a lot sooner than you would think lately. I think NHL 25 had its first one like in early November and I was
Oh,
able to get
wow.
it. And I think the game comes out in like September, doesn't it? Or October?
Yeah.
I felt like I got the game really early. I got 50% off. So that's what I'm doing. I'm
Damn.
waiting. I don't pre-order this game anymore. I used to pre-order all the NHL games, but not anymore.
I'm
So
with you. I'm with you, Quads. Absolutely. Wait till the price drops. Not paying full price for it. Not a chance.
I heard they're gonna add GM Connected, which would be really cool. Like I think we're gonna have to start a Canucks Convo community GM Connected if that happens. Owner Quads. I just trade for all the tallest guys in the NHL. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. If they put GM Connected in, maybe I'll buy it. But if it's just the same game again, it's like, who cares, right? So, anyways, thanks for that question, Dr. Haas.
I don't. So this is one thing I wanted to ask because I don't play. Like I played the NHL games religiously growing up until about NHL 14, and then like now the newest console I have is a PS3. So I'm obviously aging out here. But when my when we're meeting up with friends, like in person, we'll boot up NHL once in a while, maybe like once a month or once every like 6 or 7 weeks. And so we've played 23, played 24. Why is hitting so hard? Is 24? Yeah, like
Jacob, you want to take this one?
When 24 first came out, you used to be able to like hip check someone. You could skate with your ass facing them like 200 feet down the ice and hip check someone.
No strides.
No strides, just gliding with a hip check. So then they realized, oh no, this is broken, and now you can't hit at all. They completely.
It makes defending so hard.
Oh,
I used to be a huge, like, ask anybody that's played NHL with me, I used to seek out hits. Like, hits were my thing. I love to just shock people and step up at the blue line every time. Love to do it. You can't do it as much. And I've gotten better at it.
I kind of like the 23 gameplay better than 24.
Likewise. Yeah.
Although the crossing passes were OP. They're still kind of OP, but I feel like they've
been OP since NHL 14.
Yeah.
NHL 11 even. But anyways, okay, we went on a while for this. I'm playing this college football game. I'll tell you that. EA got that one right. I'm liking the college football game.
So much fun.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of late nights since that game came out.
Yeah. Yeah, and Dr. Haas again, he said, bro, I remember NHL during the PS3, Xbox 360 days. Those were the golden ages. I have never had as much fun with a video game as I did with NHL 14 on the PS3. Never had that much fun with a video game. That was the golden age. I like it. I like that. Dr. Haas, great take. Great take. Okay, do we have any other actual hockey related questions? I don't think we do. So I'll close it out with this one. I don't know if you saw this, Harm. Baseball talk real quick. The Chicago White Sox have a chance to lose 24 straight games. That would be an MLB record. They would set the record. That would set the record, not tie it. The record's 23, right, Jacob?
I believe. I will double check that, but I think you're right. I think it's 24 to break the record.
My point is that they're going to do something crazy if they lose 24 straight games. If they lose, because they're at 21 right now. If they lose 24 straight games, it will come at home against their rival Chicago Cubs, and it will come, get this, Harm, on fireworks night. It's post-game fireworks night at their ballpark. They are going to set the MLB record. I'm just hoping it happens. Knock on wood, it happens. 24 straight losses, set the MLB record, and then have fireworks to celebrate afterwards against their rival Cubs. I cannot imagine. It is so good. It is so good, and I needed to highlight it. It's so funny. Yeah, 23 losses for Cape Town Chef said. 1961 Philadelphia Phillies. We lost a listener. Viper's Whip said bye as soon as I started talking about baseball. But the White Sox drama, it's so good.
Did I tell the story on air of last season? I was flying from, I think it was LA to Vegas, and the guy in the seat next to me, who we ended up talking on the entire plane ride for like an hour, was Jerry Reinsdorf's nephew.
You did tell me this. Yes. I don't know if you told this on air though.
I don't know if I did, but it was like he told me stories of like the 90s Bulls. And yeah, I think there's a reason why there weren't a lot of good, entertaining White Sox stories.
Yep. His uncle doesn't give. Anyways, whatever. We're not gonna start talking about baseball ownerships again because I do that enough on this show when I talk.
Who's the is there an NHL owner equivalent of Jerry Reinsdorf?
Jacob?
I don't know.
I don't think so, right?
Yeah, NHL owners are so faceless and boring compared to some of the other sports. Like I could name a bunch of like NFL owners. Melnick, maybe that might be a good one, but obviously he doesn't own them anymore. Yeah, I feel like it's easier to compare NFL owners than NHL owners when you're talking about someone like that. But
all right,
I don't know. Maybe Melnick's probably the best comparison.
I feel like it has to be. Okay, so with that, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365. Keep it simple, folks. The White Sox are playing a baseball game tonight. We are taking their opponent, the Oakland Athletics, another team with awful ownership, to beat them. Right now, the Oakland A's, who are also not a very good team, are the favorites at minus 205 odds to beat the Chicago White Sox, give the White Sox their 22nd straight loss. That one, minus 205 over on Bet365. That was our bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365. Like I said, be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. It must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Don't forget to fill out the survey, folks, for Thursday's episode, the Family Feud episode on Thursday. Don't forget to fill out the survey. It's in the YouTube description. It's in the podcast description. And shortly, it will be out on Twitter as well. But for now, signing off for my co-host, Harman Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Lazar. My name is Dave Gugelli. Thank you so much for this episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube